dugsiga boardingka iyo maalinlaha ah ee Amano Boarding and Day School.
My name is Teacher Eric. Our social lesson today, we shall be looking at the United Nations Organization. Now, you remember very well in our previous lesson, we looked at how the Second World War started, the reasons that led to the Second World War, and we also looked at before the World War, there was a League of Nations, an organization that was supposed to stop the Second World War, but it did not stop it. So the Second World War took place actually in 1939 to 1945. Now, during that year, actually, when the Second World War was to end, countries actually had experienced a lot of damage. Countries had experienced a lot of damage. Europe, Africa, Asia, and even America. So there was need for countries to come together to stop another war, another world war. And that means that they formed an organization. They formed a big organization, a big group. This organization was referred to as the United Nations Organization. And that means that learners, by the end of our lesson today, you should be in a position to state the year in which the United Nations Organization was formed. You should also be able to state the headquarters. Where are the headquarters of the United Nations? You should also be in a position actually to state, you see, the aims. You're talking about the aims of the United Nations, the aims. Aims are objectives, reasons why the United Nations was formed, right? I'll lead you through all this, and straight away we shall go through the following, that after the Second World War, actually, Europe countries started now preaching peace. They wanted peace. They did not want anything to do with war. Why? Most of their soldiers had died. Most of their companies had collapsed. Most of their people had died. So they wanted to preach peace. And the same to USA. USA actually was being disturbed. The leaders were being disturbed. People were calling out the USA for having bombed and destroyed Japan. You remember last time we talked about the two cities in Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that were actually bombed by massive bombs that were dropped by the USA in 1945 in retaliation or in revenge to what Japan had done to the US. And so that means that now this picture actually here, it cannot be seen clearly, yes, but actually it is an aftermath of how the USA bombed Japan. It dropped massive atomic bombs to two Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it was a devastating, it was actually a very bad scenario because people died, very many people died. And this means that African countries also were fighting for independence. Remember, the year was around 1945. By then, most African countries were still being colonized. And so, they had not gotten independence. They were still fighting for their own freedom. Now, in October 1945, here, I'm going to highlight it. In October 1945, all nations of the world officially launched the United Nations Organization. The United Nations Organization. This organization was actually supposed to protect other countries from other countries. We shall look at that later in the aims, actually when we shall be looking at the aims for the formation of the United Nations. Now, moving forward, it means now you've actually had to understand, or maybe the reason, okay, the year when the United Nations was formed, which is in October 1945. Good. Moving forward, we shall look at now the United Nations itself, United Nations Organization. The abbreviation or the short form of the United Nations Organization is actually UNO. Some people just prefer to it as UN. So, moving forward, we shall be looking at the UN. We shall be using the term or the abbreviation UN instead of United Nations. So whenever I use it, please, you have to bear with me that it actually means the United Nations Organization. Now, this was actually to replace the League of Nations that had been formed in 1920, but it collapsed. Now, Again, the aims of the United Nations, aims for the formation or reasons for the formation of the United Nations. Remember, earlier on in our objectives, we say that you should be able to state the aims, the reasons, or the purpose, the intention for the formation of the United Nations. Now, the aims actually for the formation of the United Nations was, one, to preserve peace and eliminate war. To eliminate actually is an English word here that actually stands for completely doing away with war, to eliminate, to do away with war. So they wanted to keep peace. To preserve is to keep peace. So the main aim, the first aim of the United Nations was to keep peace and eliminate war. Then the second one was to promote economic, social, education, and cultural development. But without education, without social and cultural development, without economic development, then no country can develop at all. People will die of starvation, people will die of malnutrition, countries will lag behind, there will be no any development. So the United Nations was to support countries to develop themselves. Good. Now, the third one, was to protect the rights of all, and all means all the countries, all the people living in a particular country. The United Nations was to actually protect all the rights of all people. Good. Now, the United Nations, when we talk about the United Nations, actually we are talking about a big organization, a big group, and any group even at home, a society, when you make a group, even in your class, you can make groups. Every group has a leader, has an assistant leader, up to the last person. So the United Nations actually is made up of all the nations. And by the way, did you know that there are approximately 195 countries in the whole world? Those of you who did know, actually, I think right now you know that there are 195 nations or countries around the world. So all these countries, actually, all of them belong to the United Nations. And that means these countries need a leader. Now, these leaders are what we shall now be looking at as the organs of the United Nations, from the top rank up to the bottom rank. So all these organs play various roles. They are important. You see, like in a group, we have a person who is actually the chair, we have a person who is the deputy, we have a person who is in charge of keeping accounts. So all those people play different roles. They are important. The UN, actually, its headquarters is in New York, the United States of America, but it has other organs which are very important. These organs here, we shall be looking at them, and they are as follow. One, the topmost organ is the General Assembly, then followed by the Security Council. Now, General Assembly actually is made up of now the leaders. These leaders are the one who oversee. It's like now, for example, in a school, we have the management, then we have the teachers, we have the prefects, and we have now the other students. So General Assembly, like in a school setting, it's now the management. They sit normally in every year they have a sitting, they have an assembly, they sit. And two, we have the Security Council. When we talk about Security Council, we're actually talking about countries. Among those 195 countries, we have 5 countries that are permanent members of the Security Council. We shall look at them in our next lesson. And this includes the USA and the France, Britain, China, and Russia. They are powerful. We also call them the veto power countries, meaning that any country that tries to break the rules or tries to attack another country, this Security Council can sit and discuss, then decide to attack the other country that is actually offending or invading the other country. So these ones here, we call them the Security Council. It is a very important organ. The third organ is now here the Secretariat. Then the fourth one, secretariat, actually these are people. Now this one's here, the secretariat are actually what you call workers, or rather employees. They work in the office, and the UNO actually has more than 55,000 employees. They work in the offices. Now, number four, this fourth organ is the International Court of Justice. When there's a country that is violating the rule, a country attacking another country without any good reason, they have to be reported. The leaders will have to be reported. You know, then that actually makes us the fourth. Then the fifth is the Trusteeship Council, and then the sixth and the last one is the Economic and Social Council. This one is responsible now for all the activities, all the concerns of the rights of people here. Good. Now, moving forward, just to try and sum up what we have done in our lesson today, it is important that you have to remember back to the lesson objective that we had. One, we have looked at the year in which the United Nations was formed, and that was 1945, in October 1945. We have also looked at the headquarter of the United Nations, which is in New York. New York is in the United States of America. Then we have also looked at the three important reasons or aims or objectives for the formation of the United Nations. And class, we have said that United Nations was formed in order to preserve peace and eliminate war. It was also supposed to protect the rights of all the people. And going forward also, we have looked at the organs of the United Nations. And the topmost organ is the General Assembly, followed by, we've looked at it already, the Security Council and the Secretariat, among others. We also have looked at the International Court of Justice, right? The Trusteeship, and also the Economic Council. So all those actually are organs of the United Nations organization. Next time when we meet, I'll be giving you some assignment to try and gauge whether you've been following the lesson. Thank you for watching. Have a nice time. Bye. See you.